My husband forgot to hang up after saying I love you. Then I heard him laugh, and my stepbrother's voice, she actually believes you. The meds are working, soon she won't even trust her own name. My blood ran cold. They were plotting against me. My inheritance. I dropped the phone. Disappeared without a word. And planned. 3 weeks later. They walked straight into their doom. The words I love you too should have been a comforting embrace, the soft landing at the end of a phone call. Instead, they shattered my entire world, revealing a betrayal so deep, it still chills me to the bone. I was still holding the phone to my ear, waiting for the familiar click, when I heard my husband's voice again. But this time, he wasn't talking to me. She bought it completely, Blake said, his voice dripping with the satisfaction I'd foolishly mistaken for contentment in our marriage. My blood turned to ice water. The phone trembled in my hand as another voice, one that made my stomach drop through the floor, joined the conversation. The insurance policy is solid, my stepbrother Cameron said, his words cutting me like shards of glass. 2 million, plus the inheritance properties. Once we trigger the clause about her instability, it all transfers clean. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, my heart hammering so loud I was terrified they'd hear it through the connection. Our kitchen, with its cheerful yellow walls and the coffee mug Blake had bought me for our anniversary, suddenly felt like a stage set, fake and hollow. The medication switch was genius, Blake continued, and I could practically hear his smug smile. Dr. Whitmore thinks he's helping her depression, but those pills are going to make her paranoid, erratic. A few more weeks and we'll have all the documentation we need. My legs gave out. I slumped against the cold granite counter, the phone slipping from my numb fingers, but I could still hear them. Their voices floated up from that device, now a terrifying window into my own destruction. What about Elena? Cameron asked. She's been asking questions about the trust fund. My sister-in-law. My sister won't be a problem, Blake replied dismissively. She's too busy with her own life to dig deep. Besides, once Violet's committed, Elena will be grateful we're handling everything. Committed, the word hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away. My gaze fell on the pill bottle on the counter, the one Dr. Whitmore had prescribed just 3 weeks ago. The one Blake had been so supportive about, bringing me water every morning, making sure I took my medicine with breakfast. Those pills that had been making me feel foggy, disconnected, like I was living my life through a thick pane of glass. How long had this been going on? How long had my husband been slowly poisoning me while kissing me goodnight? How long had my stepbrother, the boy I'd helped raise after Dad married his mother, been planning to steal everything our father had left me? Their conversation continued, but their voices seemed to come from underwater now. Fragments pierced through the haze, the lawyer, power of attorney, she'll never see it coming. Each word was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I'd been living. My name is Violet Ashford, and until 3 minutes ago, I believed I was a woman struggling with depression after losing my father, supported by a loving husband and a caring family. Now, I knew I was prey, and the hunters had been circling me for months. I forced myself to breathe, to think. The phone was still connected. They still didn't know I could hear them. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt sharp, clear, probably because I'd forgotten to take my morning medication in my rush to get to my therapy appointment. Therapy, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Dr. Whitmore, who'd been so quick to prescribe, so eager to document my episodes. How much was Blake paying him? Or was Cameron pulling those strings? I picked up the phone with shaking hands and ended the call. The silence that followed was more deafening than their conversation had been. Then, in my kitchen, the kitchen where Blake made me coffee every morning, where Cameron had eaten Sunday dinners, where I'd felt safe and loved, I began to plan. They thought they were hunting a wounded deer. They had no idea they'd just awakened a wolf. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I pretended to take my medication. Blake watched me swallow the pill with his usual concerned smile, the same expression he'd worn when he held my hand at Dad's funeral, when he'd promised to take care of everything. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from my face with fingers that now felt like ice against my skin. "Better," I lied, forcing myself to lean into his touch. "The fog is lifting a little." His smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "That's wonderful, but remember what Dr. Whitmore said. Recovery isn't linear. You might have some bad days ahead. He was setting the stage for my inevitable breakdown. How thoughtful of him. I know, I said softly. I'm just grateful to have you taking care of everything. I don't know what I'd do without you. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but Blake's expression relaxed. He kissed my forehead, and I had to fight not to flinch away. I'll always take care of you, Violet. Always. After he left for work, I spat the pill into my palm and flushed it down the toilet. Then I called in sick to my job at the art gallery, a job Blake had been encouraging me to quit, claiming the stress was too much for my fragile state. I had work to do. My first stop was the bank. I'd been letting Blake handle our finances since Dad's death, too grief-stricken and medicated to care about money. But I still had access to my accounts, and I needed to see exactly what had been happening to my inheritance. The numbers on the screen made my stomach turn: transfers, withdrawals, investment changes, all authorized with my electronic signature. Except I'd never authorized any of them. Blake had been systematically moving my money, small amounts at first, then larger chunks as my depression worsened and I became less involved in day-to-day decisions. Mrs. Benjamin, the bank manager, appeared at my shoulder. She'd known my family for years, helped Dad set up my trust fund. "Mrs. Ashford, is everything all right? You look pale." I turned to her. "Mrs. Benjamin, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." She nodded, concern creasing her features. "Has my husband been in here recently, making changes to my accounts?" Her expression shifted, becoming guarded. "Mrs. Ashford, perhaps we should discuss this in my office." The private office felt like a confessional. She sat across from me, her hands folded on the desk, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. "Your husband has power of attorney," she said carefully. "The paperwork was filed 6 weeks ago, after you started having difficulties." "What difficulties?" My blood ran cold. "The incident here at the bank." "You don't remember?" "What incident?" Mrs. Benjamin's face crumpled with sympathy. "Oh, honey. You came in very upset, crying about people following you, insisting that someone was trying to steal your money. You seemed very confused. Your husband came to collect you, and the next week he brought in the power of attorney documents, signed by you and witnessed by Dr. Whitmore." The room spun around me. I gripped the arms of my chair, fighting off a wave of nausea. "They drugged me, brought me here in a compromised state, then used my breakdown as justification for taking control of my finances." "Mrs. Benjamin," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to freeze all my accounts right now." "I can't do that without what? Without my husband's permission?" I leaned forward, letting her see the desperation in my eyes. That power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses. I was under the influence of drugs. She stared at me for a long moment, weighing my words against what she'd witnessed weeks ago. Finally, she reached for her phone. "I'm calling Dr. Whitmore," she said. "If you're having another episode, no." I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward. "Don't call him, please. He's part of this." But she was already dialing. I watched helplessly as she spoke in low tones, describing my paranoid delusions and erratic behavior. When she hung up, her expression had hardened. "Dr. Whitmore is on his way," she said. "And I've called your husband. They're both very concerned about you." I was trapped. If I stayed, they'd have me committed within hours. If I ran, it would only confirm their narrative that I was unstable. But I couldn't let them win. Not when I was so close to understanding the full scope of their betrayal. "I need to use the restroom," I said. Mrs. Benjamin hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, but Violet, please don't do anything rash. Your family loves you. They just want to help." I smiled at her, the same trusting smile I'd been giving Blake for months. "I know. I'll be right back." The bank's restroom had a window that opened onto the alley. It was a tight squeeze, and I ruined my favorite dress climbing through, but I made it out just as I heard Blake's voice in the lobby, that concerned husband tone he'd perfected. I had maybe an hour before they realized I was gone and started looking for me. I needed help, and I needed it from someone they wouldn't expect, Elena. My sister-in-law lived 20 minutes away in a neighborhood that screamed suburban perfection. Elena had always been the practical one, the skeptic who asked hard questions and didn't accept easy answers. If anyone would believe me, it would be her. But when she opened her front door and saw me standing there, disheveled and wild-eyed, her expression immediately shifted to concern. "Violet, what happened?" Blake called. "He said you'd had an episode at the bank." "He called you already?" My heart sank. Of course, he had. They were covering all their bases. "Come inside," Elena said, ushering me into her pristine living room. "You look terrible. When's the last time you ate something?" I couldn't remember. The medication had been suppressing my appetite for weeks. "Elena, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Blake and Cameron are trying to have me committed so they can steal my inheritance." She sat down across from me, her face carefully neutral. "That's a very serious accusation. I heard them talking. Blake forgot to hang up the phone after our call yesterday, and I heard everything. They've been spiking me, Elena. The pills Dr. Whitmore prescribed? They're not antidepressants. They're making me paranoid and confused so they can claim I'm mentally incompetent." Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "You know how that sounds, right? Like the ravings of a mentally ill woman." "I know. That's exactly what they're counting on." I leaned forward, grabbing her hands. "But you know me, Elena. You've known me for 8 years. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever been anything but rational and level-headed?" She squeezed my hands gently. "No, but grief can change people, Violet. And depression, I'm not depressed." The words exploded out of me, louder than I'd intended. I mean, I was sad about Dad, of course I was. But I wasn't suicidal or delusional or any of the things Blake has been telling people. The only time I felt crazy is when I've been taking those pills. Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw Blake's name on the screen. "Don't answer it," I pleaded. "Please, just give me 5 minutes to prove what I'm saying." She hesitated, then declined the call. 5 minutes. I pulled out my phone and showed her the banking app, the transfers and withdrawals that had been happening without my knowledge. Then I showed her the pill bottle, explaining how Blake had been so insistent about my medication schedule. "This could all be explained," Elena said, but her voice was less certain now. "Maybe Blake was just trying to help manage your finances while you were grieving, and the medication, then explain this." I played the recording I'd made of yesterday's phone call. I'd been smart enough to start recording the moment I realized Blake hadn't hung up. Elena's face went white as she listened to her brother's voice discussing my instability and the insurance money. When Cameron's voice joined in, talking about triggering clauses and transferring assets, she looked like she might be sick. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Violet, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "You believe me?" "How could I not?" That's Blake's voice, clear as day. She stood up, pacing to the window. "But this is criminal. We need to call the police." "With what proof? A recording that could be dismissed as fake? My word against a respected doctor and my grieving husband?" I shook my head. "They've been planning this for months, Elena. They have documentation, witnesses, medical records. By the time the police sort through it all, I'll be locked up in a psychiatric facility, and they'll have cleaned out every account." Elena's phone buzzed again. This time it was Cameron. "He's calling you now," I observed. "They're coordinating their search." She declined the call, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "What do you want to do?" "I want to destroy them, but I need help. And I need someone they trust to help me do it." Elena looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you need?" The plan we hatched was simple in concept, but devastating in its scope. Elena would call Blake back, tell him she'd found me having a breakdown in her living room, and convince him I needed immediate psychiatric intervention. She'd suggest bringing me to Dr. Whitmore's office, where Blake could sign the commitment papers. Meanwhile, I would be gathering evidence. "This is incredibly dangerous," Elena warned as she helped me climb into the back of her SUV. "They won't," I said, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Blake thinks I'm having a psychotic break." He won't expect me to be thinking clearly enough to investigate. Elena drove me to Blake's office building and dropped me off in the parking garage. I had maybe 2 hours before the fake appointment at Dr. Whitmore's office. 2 hours to find proof of what they'd been planning. Blake's law firm occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. I'd been there dozens of times for office parties and client dinners, so the security guard recognized me and waved me through without question. "Mrs. Ashford, how are you feeling?" Blake mentioned you'd been under the weather. "Much better, thank you, Jerry. I just need to grab something from Blake's office." Blake's secretary was at lunch. His office door was unlocked. I slipped inside and immediately went to his computer. He'd always been careless about passwords, using the same combination of our anniversary date and his mother's maiden name for everything. What I found in his files made my hands shake with rage. There were emails dating back 6 months, conversations with Cameron about my violent situation. They'd been planning this since before Dad's funeral, waiting for the right moment to strike. There were communications with Dr. Whitmore about medication protocols, discussions of dosages and side effects. There were forged documents with my signature, insurance forms I'd never seen, and a detailed timeline for my mental deterioration. But the worst part was the folder labeled contingency plans. Inside were photographs of me taken without my knowledge, pictures of me looking disheveled and confused, clearly taken during my worst medicated days. There were witness statements from people I'd never met, claiming to have observed my erratic behavior. There was even a fake suicide note, written in a font that mimicked my handwriting. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to destroy me so completely that no one would ever believe my side of the story. I copied everything to a flash drive, my hands trembling as I worked. Then I found something that made my blood run cold, a life insurance policy I'd never signed, with Blake as the sole beneficiary. The death benefit was $5 million. They weren't planning to have me committed just long enough to establish a pattern of mental illness and then. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena, *, they're getting suspicious. Wrap up now, *. I pocketed the flash drive and was about to leave when I heard voices in the hallway. Blake's voice and Cameron's. They were coming back early. I looked around frantically for somewhere to hide, but Blake's office was too open, too exposed. The voices were getting closer. In desperation, I ducked under his desk, pulling the chair in to hide me just as the door opened. "Told you we should have moved faster," Cameron was saying. "She's getting too suspicious. That stunt at the bank could have ruined everything." "Relax," Blake replied, and I heard him settle into his chair directly above me. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure he could hear it. "Elena has her now. She's probably sedated and on her way to Whitmore's facility as we speak." "What if she has proof?" Blake laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. "Proof of what? The paranoid delusions of a mentally unstable woman? Even if she did have proof, who's going to believe her? We have medical documentation going back months. We have witnesses. We have her own family supporting our version of events." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The flash drive in my pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. "Besides," Blake continued, "once she's committed, it won't matter what she thinks she heard. Whitmore will have her so medicated she won't remember her own name, let alone some conspiracy theory about her loving husband." "And the final phase?" Cameron asked. 6 months, maybe less, if we can accelerate her decline. A tragic accident in the psychiatric facility, brought on by the overwhelming guilt of her paranoid accusations against the people who loved her most. Very sad, very believable. I bit down on my knuckles so hard I tasted blood. They were planning to take my life and make it look like I ended my own life. The life insurance policy would pay out. The inheritance would transfer to Blake as my widower, and Cameron would get his cut for helping orchestrate my destruction. "What about Elena?" Cameron asked. She seemed genuinely concerned today. Elena's always been soft-hearted. Once Violet's gone, she'll be grateful we handled such a difficult situation. She might even thank us for ending her suffering. My phone vibrated against my leg. A text message. I couldn't check it without risking discovery, but I knew it had to be Elena wondering where I was. "We should go," Blake said finally. "Whitmore is expecting us, and I want to be there when they bring her in." I need to play the devastated husband perfectly. I heard chairs scraping, footsteps moving toward the door. Then Blake's voice again, closer now, like he was looking back at his desk. You know what the beautiful part is? She actually believed I loved her, right up until the end. She trusted me completely. It almost makes me feel sorry for her, almost. When she's worth $7 million, that buys a lot of sympathy. They left, their laughter echoing in the hallway. I stayed under the desk for another 5 minutes, making sure they were really gone before crawling out on shaking legs. $7 million. That's what my life was worth to them. That's what my father's love, my trust, my marriage vows meant in their cold, calculating minds. I checked my phone. 3 missed texts from Elena, each more urgent than the last. *, where are you? They're asking questions. I told them you went to the bathroom, but they're getting suspicious. Violet, they know you're not here. Blake is furious. Get out now, *, I ran. I made it to the parking garage just as Elena's SUV screeched around the corner. I dove into the passenger seat, and she floored it before I'd even closed the door. What happened? She gasped. Blake called me, screaming, saying you'd never been at my house, that I was lying to him. I've never heard him like that before. Because his mask is slipping, I said, still breathing hard. Elena, it's worse than we thought. They're not just planning to steal from me. They're planning to take my life. I told her everything I'd overheard, showed her the files I'd copied. Elena pulled over in an empty parking lot and sat staring at the evidence, her face pale with shock. We have to go to the police now, she said. This is an attempt to take a life. Is it? They haven't actually tried to take me out yet. And look at this from a cop's perspective, a woman with documented mental health issues, claiming her husband and stepbrother are trying to kill her for money. The same woman who just broke into her husband's office and stole confidential files. Elena's phone rang. Blake's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, I said, but put it on speaker. She accepted the call with trembling fingers. Elena, thank God, Blake's voice filled the car, and hearing it now, I could detect the false concern I'd been blind to for months. Is Violet with you? She's having a severe episode. She broke into my office. She's been making wild accusations. I don't know where she is, Elena lied smoothly. She left my house hours ago. She seemed really scared. What if she hurts herself? That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Blake said, and I had to admire his performance. He sounded like a man genuinely terrified for his wife's safety. Dr. Whitmore thinks she might be having a complete psychotic break. We need to find her before she does something irreversible. Have you called the police? I'm about to. Elena, if she contacts you, don't try to reason with her. In her current state, she might see you as part of whatever conspiracy she thinks is happening. After Elena hung up, we sat in silence for a moment. He's going to have you declared a missing person, Elena said finally. Probably dangerous to yourself and others. Every cop in the city will be looking for you. Then I need to disappear. But first, I need to make sure this evidence gets to someone who can use it. Who? If we can't trust the police? My father's lawyer, Richard Blackwood. He's the one who set up my trust fund, who knew Dad's wishes better than anyone. If anyone can help me navigate this legally, it's him. Elena nodded and started the car. Where does he live? He doesn't. He died 3 months ago. Elena's face fell. Then who? His daughter, Sophia Blackwood. She took over his practice. I pulled out my phone and started searching. She's young, but she's supposed to be brilliant, and she has no connection to Blake or Cameron. She might be our only shot. We drove across town to the Blackwood Law Offices, a small firm housed in a converted Victorian mansion. Sophia Blackwood was nothing like I'd expected. She couldn't have been more than 30, with short auburn hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Mrs. Ashford, she said, rising from behind her father's old desk. I was so sorry to hear about your father. He spoke of you often. Miss Blackwood, I need your help, and I need you to believe something that's going to sound impossible. I laid out everything, the overheard phone call, the medication, the financial manipulation, the evidence I'd gathered. Sophia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is extensive," she said finally. "And if even half of it is true, you're in immediate danger." "You believe me?" "I believe the evidence. These financial records, the forged documents, the insurance policies, this isn't the work of a delusional woman. This is a sophisticated, long-term fraud." She leaned forward. "But Mrs. Ashford, even with this evidence, prosecuting this case will be incredibly difficult. They've built a very convincing narrative about your mental state." "I don't want to prosecute them," I said quietly. "I want to destroy them." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I understand." "They've spent months systematically destroying my credibility, my relationships, my sense of reality. They've stolen my money and planned my end. Sending them to prison isn't enough. I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to lose everything the way they planned for me to lose everything." Elena shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Violet, maybe we should focus on just stopping them." No, I turned to face her, and I could see her flinch at whatever she saw in my eyes. "They made this personal when they decided my life was worth $7 million. When Blake kissed me goodnight while planning to take my life. When Cameron, my own stepbrother, helped forge my signature on my own doom warrant." I turned back to Sophia. "Can you help me, or not?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, then smiled. A sharp, predatory expression that reminded me of her father. "Mrs. Ashford, I think we can do better than just destroying them. I think we can make them destroy themselves." The plan Sophia outlined was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. We would use their own conspiracy against them, turning their carefully laid plans into the instruments of their downfall. "The key," Sophia explained, "is that they believe they're in control. They think you're mentally unstable and running scared. We're going to let them keep thinking that while we systematically dismantle their lives." Phase 1 was already in motion. While Blake and Cameron searched for me, Sophia was filing emergency injunctions to freeze all my accounts and assets using the evidence of fraud I'd gathered. She was also preparing criminal complaints and civil suits that would tie them up in legal battles for years. But that was just the beginning. "Your stepbrother Cameron works in real estate development, correct?" Sophia asked. "Yes. He's got several major projects in the works. Projects that depend on investors who value integrity and trust. How do you think those investors would react if they discovered he was involved in elder fraud and attempted murder?" Elena looked uncomfortable. "Isn't that? I mean, are we talking about destroying innocent people's investments?" "Cameron's projects are built on lies and stolen money," I said flatly. "Any investors who lose money because of his crimes are victims, not casualties of our revenge." Sophia nodded approvingly. "Exactly. And Blake? His law firm represents several high-profile clients who would be very interested to know their attorney has been forging documents and conspiring to commit insurance fraud." "You're talking about ending their careers," Elena said. "They were talking about ending my life," I replied. "This is mercy compared to what they planned for me." Phase 2 involved Dr. Whitmore. Sophia had contacts at the medical board who would be very interested in reviewing his patient files, especially the suspicious patterns of medication and the financial relationships with certain patients' families. "But the most important part," Sophia said, "is that we need them to incriminate themselves further. Right now, we have evidence of fraud and conspiracy, but we need them to take actions that clearly demonstrate intent to harm you." "How do we do that?" "We give them what they want. We let them think they've won." The plan required me to disappear completely for 72 hours while Sophia set the legal machinery in motion. Elena took me to her family's cabin in the mountains, a place Blake had never been and Cameron didn't know existed. For 3 days, I lived like a ghost. No phone, no internet, no contact with the outside world. Elena brought me supplies and updates, but mostly I sat alone with my thoughts and my rage, planning what I would say when the time came. On the 3rd day, Elena arrived with news. "It's working," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Blake filed a missing person report claiming you're suicidal and dangerous. Cameron's been calling in favors trying to get the police to prioritize finding you, and Dr. Whitmore has been preparing a psychiatric hold order." "What about the legal side?" "Sophia has been busy. She's filed complaints with the medical board, the bar association, and the district attorney's office. She's also been quietly contacting Cameron's investors and Blake's clients, just asking innocent questions about their relationships. And Elena grinned. 3 of Cameron's biggest investors have pulled out. Blake's firm is conducting an internal investigation, and Dr. Whitmore's medical license is under review. Good, but it's not enough. They need to confess. They need to admit what they've done in a way that can't be denied or explained away. How do we make that happen? I smiled, and Elena took a step back at the expression on my face. We give them exactly what they've been planning for. We stage my death. The plan was insane, dangerous, and absolutely perfect. Sophia had a contact in the coroner's office, a woman who owed her father a favor and was willing to help stage a death certificate. Elena would find my body at the bottom of a cliff near the cabin, an apparent accident brought on by my mental breakdown. The body would be too damaged for immediate identification, buying us time. Meanwhile, I would be hidden in a safe house Sophia had arranged, watching as Blake and Cameron celebrated their victory and inevitably revealed the full scope of their crimes. This is crazy, Elena said for the 100th time as we prepared. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, I said, though my heart was racing. Blake and Cameron think they're so smart, so careful, but they're about to make the biggest mistake of their lives, which is, they're going to trust each other. The staged accident went perfectly. Elena called 911 in hysterics, reporting that she'd found my car abandoned near the cliff and my body at the bottom. The responding officers found the scene exactly as we'd arranged it, my jacket caught on a tree branch, my purse scattered on the rocks, and a body that would require dental records to identify. From my hiding place in Sophia's safe house, I watched the news coverage with grim satisfaction. Blake played the grieving widower perfectly, giving interviews about my struggle with mental illness and his desperate attempts to get me help. She was the love of my life, he told the reporter, tears streaming down his face. I just wish I could have saved her. Cameron was more subdued but equally convincing, talking about how the family had tried to support me through my difficult time after Dad's death. But I knew the real conversation would happen when they thought no one was watching. Sophia had arranged for surveillance equipment to be placed in Blake's house and Cameron's office. We didn't have to wait long. 2 days after my death, they met at Blake's house to celebrate. I can't believe it actually worked, Cameron said, his voice carrying clearly through the hidden microphones. When she jumped, I thought for sure someone would figure out we'd driven her to it. Please, Blake scoffed. Everyone knows she was mentally unstable. The accident was inevitable. We just helped it along. The insurance money should come through within the month. $5 million, plus the inheritance properties, split 50-50, just like we agreed. Actually, Blake said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I've been thinking about our arrangement. There was a pause. What do you mean? Well, I did most of the work. The medication, the psychological manipulation, dealing with her day after day. You just helped with the financial side. We agreed on 50-50, Blake. We agreed on a lot of things, but Violet's dead now, and dead women don't have stepbrothers. As far as the law is concerned, I'm her only heir. I leaned forward, hardly believing what I was hearing. They were already turning on each other, just as I'd hoped. You bastard! Cameron snarled. This was my idea. I'm the one who figured out how to access her trust fund. I'm the one who found Dr. Whitmore. And I'm the one who married her. I'm the one who spent 2 years pretending to love a woman I couldn't stand. Do you have any idea how exhausting it was? Pretending to care about her feelings, her stupid art gallery job, her pathetic attempts at cooking? The words hit me like physical blows. Even though I'd known they were coming, hearing Blake describe our marriage as an elaborate con game, hearing the contempt in his voice when he talked about the life we built together, it was almost more than I could bear. But I forced myself to keep listening. I earned every penny of that money, Blake continued. And if you think you're going to waltz in and take half of it, you're more delusional than Violet was. I'll expose everything. Cameron threatened. I'll tell the police about the medication, about Dr. Whitmore, about all of it. Blake laughed. With what proof? You think I kept records of our conspiracy? I've already destroyed it. My heart sank. If Blake had destroyed the evidence, then everything I'd copied might be worthless. Besides, Blake continued, who's going to believe you? You're just a grieving stepbrother trying to cash in on your sister's death. I am the devastated widower. Guess which story the jury will find more compelling? You bastard, Cameron said, and I could hear the rage building in his voice. You think you can just cut me out after everything I've done? I think I can do whatever I want. Violet's dead. The money's mine, and you can't prove otherwise. There was a sound of scuffling. Then Cameron's voice, strained and angry. Get your hands off me. Get out of my house, Blake said coldly. And if you ever threaten me again, I'll make sure the police know exactly who gave me the idea to spike my poor, mentally ill wife. This isn't over. Cameron spat. Yes, it is. Violet's dead, and so is our partnership. Don't contact me again. I heard a door slam, then silence. Through the surveillance feed, I watched Blake pour himself a drink and toast the empty room. To Violet, he said with a cruel smile. Thanks for the $7 million, sweetheart. I turned off the recording and sat back, my hands shaking with rage. Sophia, who had been listening beside me, was already on her phone. Did you get all that? She asked whoever was on the other end. Perfect. Yes, we'll need copies for the DA's office. She hung up and turned to me. We have them. Full confessions, admissions of conspiracy, and Blake just threatened Cameron with blackmail. This is more than enough to put them both away for decades. Good, I said, but my voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. When do we move? Tomorrow morning, the police will arrest them simultaneously, and will release your miraculous survival story to the press. You'll be the woman who faked her own death to expose her husband's evil plot. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. Violet? Elena's voice came from behind me. She'd been staying at the safe house with me. Are you okay? I heard my husband describe our entire marriage as a lie, I said quietly. I heard him laugh about my death. I heard him toast my memory while planning to spend the money he got from me. I looked up at her. How am I supposed to be okay? Elena sat down beside me and took my hand. You're supposed to be alive. Everything else we can work on. The arrests happened at dawn. I watched from Sophia's office as news vans surrounded Blake's house in Cameron's apartment building. The footage of them being led away in handcuffs should have been satisfying, but all I felt was a strange numbness. Mrs. Ashford, Sophia's assistant, knocked on the door. The press conference is in an hour. Are you ready? I looked at myself in the mirror. I'd lost weight during my weeks of being spiked, and the stress of the past few days had left dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a woman who'd been through hell, which I suppose I had. As ready as I'll ever be. The press conference was a circus. Reporters shouted questions about how I'd survived, why I'd faked my death, what I'd discovered about my husband's plot. I answered them mechanically, sticking to the script Sophia and I had prepared. But when one reporter asked how I felt about my husband's betrayal, I found myself going off script. You want to know how it feels? I said, looking directly into the camera. It feels like discovering that the person you trusted most in the world has been quietly destroying you, bit by bit, for months. It feels like learning that every I love you is a lie. Every kiss was a performance. Every moment of intimacy was just him calculating how much money my death would be worth. The room fell silent. It feels like dying while you're still alive, I continued. Blake didn't just plan to kill my body. He killed my ability to trust, my faith in love, my belief that the people closest to me actually cared whether I lived or died. At least if he'd just shot me, I would have died believing our marriage was real. I stood up, ignoring Sophia's attempts to get me to sit back down. But here's what Blake and Cameron didn't count on, I said, my voice growing stronger. They didn't count on me being smart enough to figure out their game. They didn't count on me having people who actually cared about me, like my sister-in-law, Elena, and my lawyer, Sophia. And they definitely didn't count on me being angry enough to fight back. I leaned toward the microphones. To anyone else out there who might be going through something similar, if someone is trying to convince you that you're crazy, if someone is pushing medication you don't need, if someone is isolating you from your support system, trust your instincts. You're not paranoid, You're not delusional, and you are not alone. I walked out of the press conference to thunderous applause, but I barely heard it. All I could think about was going home, except I didn't have a home anymore. The house I'd shared with Blake was a crime scene now. And even if it wasn't, I could never live there again. The trial was a media sensation. Blake and Cameron both tried to claim they'd been framed, that I'd somehow orchestrated an elaborate hoax to make them look guilty. But the evidence was overwhelming: the recordings, the forged documents, the testimony from Dr. Whitmore, who had flipped and agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through every detail of the conspiracy. I told them about the pills that made me feel like I was losing my mind, about the financial manipulations I'd discovered, about the moment I'd heard my husband planning to take my life. Blake's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive woman seeking revenge on an innocent man, but the recordings spoke for themselves. When the jury heard Blake toasting my death and bragging about the insurance money, several of them looked physically ill. The verdict came back after only 4 hours of deliberation: guilty on all counts. Blake got 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. Cameron got 20 years for his role in the conspiracy. Dr. Whitmore got 10 years and lost his medical license permanently. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice had been served. Instead, I felt hollow. 6 months after the trial, I was living in a small apartment across town, trying to rebuild a life that felt completely foreign to me. The insurance companies had paid out the claims on my death, then sued to get the money back when I turned up alive. My inheritance was tied up in legal proceedings. The art gallery had fired me during my mental health crisis, and no one seemed eager to hire the woman who'd faked her own death, even if it was for good reasons. Elena visited regularly, but I could see the worry in her eyes. I wasn't getting better. If anything, I was getting worse. The numbness that had started during the trial had spread until I felt like I was living my life through thick glass, watching everything happen to someone else. You need to talk to someone, Elena said during one of her visits. A therapist, a counselor, someone who can help you process what happened. I've had enough of therapists, I said flatly. The last one was trying to have me committed so my husband could steal my money. Not all therapists are Dr. Whitmore. There are good ones out there, people who actually want to help. I knew she was right, but I couldn't bring myself to care. What was the point of healing when everything I'd believed about my life had been a lie? What was the point of moving forward when I couldn't trust my own judgment about people? The doorbell rang, interrupting my spiral of self-pity. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Elena was already here. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and a patient expression. Mrs. Ashford, my name is Dr. Camilla Asher. I'm a psychiatrist, but I'm not here in a professional capacity. I'm here because I read about your case, and I wanted to talk to you about something important. I opened the door, but kept the chain on. If this is about treatment, it's not. It's about other women, women who've been through what you've been through. She got my attention. I unlatched the chain and let her in. Dr. Asher sat down in my living room and pulled out a folder. I've been working with victims of psychological abuse for 15 years, she said. What happened to you, the systematic spiking of your drinks, the gaslighting, the financial manipulation, it's more common than you might think. She opened the folder and showed me photographs, documents, news clippings. These are just from the past year. Women whose husbands or family members tried to have them declared incompetent. Women who were manipulated and told they were crazy. Most of them didn't figure it out in time. I stared at the photos. Women of all ages, all backgrounds, all with the same haunted look in their eyes that I saw in my own mirror every morning. What happened to them? Some are in psychiatric facilities, heavily medicated and unable to advocate for themselves. Some lost everything and are living in poverty. A few, she paused. A few didn't survive. The weight of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. You're saying there are other Blakes out there. Other Camerons. I'm saying there's an entire network of people who prey on vulnerable women, especially women with money or property. They use the mental health system as a weapon, turning doctors and lawyers, and even family members into accomplices. Elena leaned forward. What can we do about it? Dr. Asher smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. That's why I'm here, Mrs. Ashford. You have something these other women don't have. You have proof. You have evidence. You have a story that people believe. So, you have the power to expose this whole system, to help other women who are going through what you went through, to make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the women in the photographs, about the hollow look in their eyes that matched my own. What would I have to do? Tell your story. Not just the sensational parts that made the news, but the real story. The subtle signs, the gradual erosion of your autonomy, the way they made you doubt your own sanity. Help other women recognize the warning signs before it's too late. And you think that would help? I think it could save lives. The foundation started small. Just me, Dr. Asher, and Elena, working out of a rented office space downtown. We called it the Violet Ashford Foundation for Psychological Abuse Awareness, and our mission was simple: to educate women about the warning signs of systematic psychological manipulation and to provide resources for those who suspected they were being targeted. The first few months were hard. I had to relive my story over and over again, speaking to support groups and women's organizations, giving interviews to journalists and researchers. Every time I told it, I felt like I was picking at a wound that refused to heal. But something strange started happening. Women began reaching out to us. Women who recognized their own experiences in my story. Women who had been told they were paranoid or delusional when they suspected their loved ones were manipulating them. There was Margaret, whose son had been slowly increasing her medication while transferring her assets to his name. There was Lisa, whose husband had been gaslighting her for years, making her believe she had early-onset dementia so he could take control of her successful business. There was Jennifer, whose stepfather had been forging her signature on legal documents while her mother looked the other way. Each story was different, but the pattern was always the same: isolation, medication, gaslighting, and financial manipulation. And in every case, the victim had been told by well-meaning friends and family that they were imagining things, that their loved ones would never hurt them. The hardest part, Margaret told me during one of our support group meetings, wasn't the money. It was realizing that my own son saw me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. I knew exactly what she meant. As the foundation grew, we started developing resources, checklists of warning signs, legal guides for protecting assets, networks of trusted doctors and lawyers who understood psychological abuse. We created a hotline for women who suspected they were being manipulated, staffed by volunteers who had been through similar experiences. But the most important thing we did was listen. We believed women when they said something was wrong, even when they couldn't prove it yet. We validated their instincts and helped them trust themselves again. 5 years after Blake's conviction, I stood in front of a congressional committee, testifying about the need for federal legislation to combat psychological abuse and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. The current system, I told the assembled lawmakers, treats these crimes as civil matters or family disputes. But what happened to me, and hundreds of other women, these aren't family disputes. They're sophisticated criminal enterprises that destroy lives and steal billions of dollars every year. I looked out at the committee members, some of whom were taking notes, others checking their phones. But a few were really listening, and that was enough. The perpetrators count on our silence, I continued. They count on the shame and self-doubt of their victims. They count on a system that doesn't take women seriously when they say something is wrong. But we're not silent anymore. We're not ashamed. And we're not going away. The legislation passed 6 months later. The Violet Ashford Act created federal penalties for psychological abuse in cases involving financial exploitation, established funding for victim services, and required training for law enforcement and medical professionals. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt like I'd finally gotten justice, not just for myself, but for all the women who'd been silenced and dismissed and told they were crazy. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. The call came on a Friday morning in spring. I was in my office at the foundation, reviewing a case file when my assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Ashford, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." I looked up to see a young woman in her 20s with dark hair and nervous eyes. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, stepping into my office. "My name is Rachel Whitmore. I'm Dr. Whitmore's daughter." The file slipped from my hands. Dr. Whitmore, the psychiatrist who had helped Blake, who had been planning to have me committed. He'd been released from prison 6 months ago after serving his reduced sentence. I know you have no reason to listen to me, Rachel continued quickly, seeing my expression, but I need to tell you something about my father, about what he's doing now. I gestured for her to sit down, my heart already racing. What do you mean? He's doing it again. The same thing he did to you. He's found new victims, new partners. And this time he's being more careful. Rachel pulled out a folder and set it on my desk. I've been watching him since he got out. I know what he did to you is unforgivable, but he's my father, and I hoped prison had changed him. But it didn't. If anything, it made him smarter about covering his tracks. I opened the folder and felt my blood run cold. There were photographs of elderly women, medical records, financial documents. It was the same pattern I'd seen before: systematic drugging, isolation, financial manipulation. How many? I asked quietly. At least 6 that I know of. Maybe more. He's working with a network now. Other doctors, lawyers, care facility administrators. They're targeting wealthy widows, women with substantial assets and no close family to protect them. I studied the photographs, seeing my own story reflected in these women's faces, the confusion, the fear, the gradual erosion of their autonomy. Why are you telling me this? Why not go to the police? Rachel's face crumpled. I tried, but he's learned from his mistakes. Everything looks legitimate on paper. The medications are prescribed for valid conditions. The financial arrangements are properly documented. The families seem genuinely concerned. Without someone on the inside, without proof of the conspiracy, the police think I'm just a daughter trying to cause trouble for her criminal father. Exactly. She leaned forward. But you stopped him before. You exposed him. If anyone can do it again, it's you. I stared at the files, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I'd built a good life for myself over the past 5 years. The foundation was thriving. I'd found peace. I'd even started dating again, a kind man named Maverick who knew my story and loved me anyway. I could walk away from this. Let someone else handle it. But then I looked at the photographs again, at the faces of women who were living through what I'd survived. Women who might not be as lucky as I'd been. What do you need from me? I asked. The investigation took 8 months. Working with Rachel as our inside source, we slowly built a case against Dr. Whitmore and his network. It was more sophisticated than anything Blake and Cameron had attempted, a multi-state operation involving dozens of conspirators and hundreds of victims. The hardest part was watching it happen in real time, knowing that women were being manipulated while we gathered evidence. But we had to be patient. Had to build an airtight case that couldn't be dismissed or plea bargained away. Mrs. Henderson is getting worse, Rachel reported during one of our weekly meetings. They've increased her medication again, and her daughter is pushing for her to sign over power of attorney. Mrs. Henderson was one of the victims we'd been monitoring, a 75-year-old widow with a substantial estate and a daughter who'd suddenly become very interested in her mother's finances after meeting Dr. Whitmore. How much time do we have? I asked. Maybe a week. Once they get the power of attorney, they'll move fast. They've learned from your case. They know not to drag it out too long. I made a decision that would have terrified the old me, the woman who trusted everyone and questioned nothing. We're going in early tonight. But we don't have enough evidence yet. We have enough to save Mrs. Henderson, and sometimes that has to be enough. The raid happened at dawn. Federal agents, coordinated by the FBI's white-collar crime unit, hit 12 locations simultaneously: Dr. Whitmore's office, the care facilities, the lawyers' offices, the homes of the conspirators. I was there when they arrested Dr. Whitmore. He looked older, more frail than I remembered, but his eyes still held the same cold calculation that had chilled me years ago. Mrs. Ashford, he said as they led him away in handcuffs. I should have known you'd be behind this. You should have stayed in prison, I replied. Or better yet, you should have found a different line of work. He smiled, an expression that made my skin crawl. You think you've won something here? You think this changes anything? There are dozens of operations like this one, hundreds of doctors and lawyers who know how profitable vulnerable women can be. You can't stop them all. Maybe not, I said, but I can stop you. And that's enough for today. The trial was even bigger than Blake and Cameron's had been. The media dubbed it the Whitmore conspiracy, and it exposed a network of corruption that reached into some of the most respected institutions in the country. Dr. Whitmore got life in prison. This time, his co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years. The care facilities were shut down. The lawyers were disbarred, and the victims, those who were still alive, began the long process of reclaiming their lives and their assets. But the most important outcome wasn't the convictions or the sentences. It was the conversation that followed. Suddenly, everyone was talking about psychological abuse, about the vulnerability of elderly women, about the systems that failed to protect them. Medical schools began requiring courses on recognizing abuse. Law enforcement agencies developed new protocols for investigating these crimes. And most importantly, women began speaking up. The Foundation's hotline was flooded with calls from women who'd recognized the warning signs in their own lives, who trusted their instincts instead of dismissing them as paranoia. We prevented dozens of cases from reaching the point mine had, helping women escape before they lost everything. "You've changed the world," Maverick told me one evening as we sat on the porch of the house we'd bought together, a small place with a garden where I could grow the flowers I'd always loved but never had time for during my marriage to Blake. "I've changed a small part of it," I corrected. "There's still so much work to do. There always will be. But that doesn't diminish what you've accomplished." I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. Maverick was nothing like Blake. He was honest where Blake had been deceptive, supportive where Blake had been manipulative, genuine where Blake had been calculating. It had taken me years to trust again, to believe that someone could love me without wanting to destroy me. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, fighting back instead of just walking away. I thought about it for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "No," I said finally. "Blake and Cameron took 2 years of my life, but they gave me something, too. They gave me purpose. They showed me that I was stronger than I ever knew." "And Dr. Whitmore?" "Dr. Whitmore reminded me that the fight isn't over. That there are always going to be predators looking for vulnerable prey, but there are also going to be people willing to stand up to them." 10 years after that phone call that changed everything, I stood in front of another congressional committee, this time testifying about the success of the Violet-Ashford Act and the need for expanded protections. "When I first told my story," I said, looking out at the assembled lawmakers, "I was just one woman trying to expose the men who tried to destroy her. I never imagined it would become a movement." The statistics were staggering. In the decade since the act had passed, prosecutions for psychological abuse had increased by 400%. The Foundation had helped over 10,000 women escape abusive situations. The hotline had fielded more than 50,000 calls. But the numbers that mattered most to me were smaller, more personal. 6 women who'd called our hotline had avoided being drugged by suspicious family members. 12 elderly women had been rescued from fraudulent care facilities. 37 women had successfully fought off attempts to have them declared incompetent. Each one was a victory. Each one was a life saved. "The predators are still out there," I continued. "They're adapting, finding new ways to exploit vulnerable women. But we're adapting too. We're listening when women say something is wrong. We're believing them when they report abuse. And we're fighting back." I paused, thinking about all the women who'd shared their stories with me over the years. All the survivors who'd found the courage to speak up. 10 years ago, I was a woman who trusted everyone and questioned nothing. I believed that the people who claimed to love me would never hurt me. I was wrong about that, and it almost cost me everything. I looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere out there, women were watching who might be going through what I'd survived. But I learned something important: being wrong about people doesn't make you weak or stupid or naive. It makes you human. And being human means you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, not manipulated and exploited. I took a breath, feeling the weight of everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned, everything I'd built from the ashes of my destroyed marriage. To any woman watching this who suspects something is wrong in her life, who's been told she's paranoid or delusional or imagining things, trust yourself. Your instincts are valid, your concerns are real, and you are not alone. I smiled, thinking about the Foundation, about the network of survivors and advocates we'd built, about the women who were finding their voices and their strength. We're here. We're listening. and we're not going anywhere. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 15 years after Blake's conviction. I was in my office at the Foundation's new headquarters, a beautiful building downtown that housed not just our organization, but a dozen other groups working to protect vulnerable adults. The return address made my hands shake. Blake Morrison, Federal Correctional Institution, Coleman, Florida. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Blake had tried to contact me several times over the years, letters that I'd thrown away unread, phone calls that I'd refused to accept. But something about this one felt different. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Blake's familiar handwriting. Violet, I know you probably won't read this, and I don't blame you. I know I have no right to contact you, no right to ask for anything from you, but I'm dying, and there are things I need to say. I have pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 7 months. I've spent the last 15 years in prison thinking about what I did to you, and I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the trust one destroyed or the years I stole from you. I can't bring back the woman you were before I broke you. But I can tell you the truth, finally and completely. I never loved you. I married you for your money, and I stayed with you for your money, and I planned to kill you for your money. Every kiss was a lie. Every I love you was a performance. Every moment of our marriage was me calculating how much you were worth to me, ***, but here's what I didn't understand then. You were worth so much more than money. You were kind and trusting and generous, and instead of treasuring those qualities, I exploited them. You deserved a husband who would protect you, not one who would destroy you, ***. I've watched the news over the years. I've seen what you've built, the women you've helped, the lives you've saved. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something beautiful. You took my betrayal and used it to protect other women from men like me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that even though I never loved you the way you deserved, I respect what you've become. You're stronger than I ever was, braver than I ever was, better than I ever was, ***. I'm sorry, Violet, for all of it. For every lie, every manipulation, every moment of pain I caused you. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you thought you married. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you deserved. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who loves you the way you should be loved. I hope you found peace, ***. Blake. I read the letter 2 times, then set it down on my desk and stared out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, women were living their lives, trusting their partners, believing in love. Some of them would be betrayed as I had been. But more of them would be protected because of the work we'd done, because of the conversations we'd started, because of the systems we'd changed. I thought about the woman I'd been 15 years ago, trusting, naive, vulnerable. She was gone, destroyed by Blake's betrayal, as surely as if he'd killed her. But from her ashes had risen someone stronger, someone who could protect others from the predators who saw vulnerability as opportunity. I picked up my phone and called Maverick. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice warm with the genuine affection I'd learned to recognize and trust. "Complicated," I said. "But good. How was yours?" "Better now that I'm talking to you." I smiled, feeling the familiar warmth that came from being loved by someone who saw me as more than a bank account, more than a target, more than a means to an end. "I love you," I said, and meant it completely. "I love you too," he replied. And I knew he meant it, too. After we hung up, I took Blake's letter and fed it into the shredder beside my desk. Then, I opened my laptop and began working on my speech for tomorrow's conference, a gathering of advocates, survivors, and law enforcement officials from around the world, all working to protect vulnerable adults from exploitation. The title of my presentation was, "From Victim to Victor, How Betrayal Can Become Purpose." I had a story to tell, and women to protect, and a world to change. Blake was dying in prison, alone and forgotten. I was living in freedom, surrounded by love and purpose. In the end, that was justice enough.